How do you go about negotiating the very best outcome in your pending divorce? That's the question a lot of people facing divorce ask. And of course, there's lots of resources out there. But today I wanted to sit down with a colleague whom I consider to be an expert in this area. I've known Carey Silvestri since around 2006. We both met while we were being trained in collaborative divorce. And I've had the pleasure of practicing with her, against her in cases, also using her as a mediator. And now I'm thrilled that she is working as of counsel with Hargrave Family Law, where she is still offering mediation services, as well as helping clients negotiate their best outcomes in divorce cases. Carey, it's a real privilege to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, of course, you and I met back in the collaborative days when we were both new to collaborative divorce. And since then, you've gone on to become a certified mediator and have done some training in negotiation. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, I started in my first mediation training in 2007 and continued to do local trainings around Dallas. My first was and I think the second was in 2008. I did my family law training and then just did some kind of small mediation trainings here and there. In 2018, I went to the Harvard mediation program. I think it's the Harvard University Negotiation Program mediation training. It's a very long name. 40-hour week-long course the summer of 2018, which was tremendously profound in learning different skills, different ways to think, different ways to talk, different ways to hear. And so I try to use those skills now in my mediation practice.
That's great. And what is it, do you think, in the negotiation process that people really need to know and understand are the key factors to a successful outcome in a divorce?
For clients going through mediation, I think the most important thing they need to bring with them is their confidence and their voice. In mediation, you have the opportunity to say whatever it is that you want to say and to be heard. If we go to court, we're answering questions that are presented to us by the attorneys, maybe by the judge, but you're not getting to tell your story. In mediation, you have the opportunity to really say whatever you want to say. And that can be verbally, it can also be just with your body language. You're allowed to just be yourself in a safe space and advocate for yourself as much as you can.
And I think one of the things that can be really detracting in negotiation process is not being clear yourself about what it is that you really want. I know a lot of people in the divorce process are getting a lot of opinions from neighbors and maybe not in-laws, but friends and siblings and just their whole community about what they should be fighting for. How do you help people kind of work through that?
It's hard sometimes to turn off those extra voices because we do feel influenced by family, friends, horror stories, things we've seen online, or what we think we're supposed to do, as opposed to listening to ourselves and what we really want to do for ourselves. And if we have children, how it would impact our children, whether they're adult children or little kids, and our future relationship with our spouse. Because oftentimes we do have a continuing relationship with that person. So there can be a lot of pressure if you're trying to juggle all those feelings and try and make everyone happy and do all these things the right way. Well, there is no right way. The right way is whatever works best for you because you're the one that has to live with that. And if you're okay, the people around you will be okay. But you can't please somebody else. And you have to learn to find your own voice and trust your own voice, which is hard because it's new territory. But be willing to ask questions. Ask questions of your attorney, ask questions of the mediator, ask questions of yourself, and give yourself the time and space that you need to find the right answers for yourself.
I think that curiosity is so key.
Yes.
And, it's not unusual to come in wanting one thing, to have expectations about maybe it's keeping the house or keeping kids in school, the same school, or, whatever that is. What do you recommend for people in terms of when they're putting together their punch list of things that they want to get in mediation?
I'm not crazy about the punch list to begin with, because then you're setting yourself up with an expectation of either winning or losing. Either you get things on your list and so you won, or you didn't, so that means that you lost. And it's fluid. I mean, our lives are fluid. Our homes are fluid. Everything that we do on a daily basis is fluid. And so I would discourage somebody from coming in with a list of, this is what I want. This is not a court trial where you have to go in with your documents prepared and show the judge, please give me these 5 things. This is an opportunity to look at things 100 different ways. Maybe try on something and explore it one way and try on it in a different way, and be willing to hear what the other person has to say. We have to be open to listening to what your spouse might have to say, and be flexible, and just be willing to have an open ear.
You were talking a little earlier when we were discussing this about how understanding and empathy are really key in negotiation.
Yes.
And what does that mean in terms of when you're trying to pay attention to the other side? Sometimes you can be so angry and so mad at somebody, and you just don't want to have empathy, and you don't care. Like, I don't want to have understanding. But why are those things important, even, especially maybe in the heat of the moment?
I think it's essential because, well, first of all, let me take a step back. Empathy doesn't mean compassion or wanting that person to feel better or giving them sympathy. Empathy is truly understanding. And if you don't really understand what's happening, it's hard to make a good decision for yourself. If you don't understand what the other person's motivations are, what their fears are, then it's hard for you to make a good decision for yourself and for the relationship, the new relationship, if you don't really know what's going on, the undercurrent behind that. And so understanding doesn't mean that you agree with it, doesn't mean that you condone it, it doesn't mean that you like it. But if you don't understand, how are you going to reach an agreement that makes any sense for yourself?
Right.
It's not about empowering the other person going, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, Jennifer. That's terrible. Let me make things better for you. That's not it. But if I don't know what your motivations are and I don't know what's really going on and I don't have a good understanding of that, we're not going to get anywhere.
And I really think when you take that time to get that clarity for yourself about your own motivations and the other side's motivations, it's actually really empowering. Right. That's the opposite of like where you're giving your power away to somebody is where you're really holding on to that power.
100%.
So let's kind of talk about like, what does that look like? We were trained in collaborative divorce together. One of the things they taught us is to pay attention to goals and interests. And so those are important, kind of a good starting point. But we also know we need to like peel it back and ask, why is this important to me?
Right. The why, the motivation for things that we want or don't want. And again, we're just peeling back layer after layer. Once we understand the why, we can go deeper and deeper if we need to or not. Sometimes we just need the answer, but there may be more to it. And the more we know, the more we can explore different options. In collaborative law, we talk about options, right? And everyone can present an option. And sometimes we think, well, if it comes from him, I'm not going to agree to it because that means that's what he wants. Well, it might be the right thing. It might be what you want too. So we need to take our ego out of it and really focus on solution.
Yeah. And so like I know one of the examples that often comes up is wanting to keep the house because you want to preserve that stability for the children, right?
Right.
And so when we really look at the goal of stability for the kids, there may be a lot of different ways to keep them in the same neighborhood or in the same school system that isn't tied to them having the exact same bedroom.
Exactly, 100%.
And that's where we find creative problem solving.
Right. Look at what is it we're trying. If we say, I want the house, that's a rigid one. There's only one solution there. Either I get the house or I don't. So either I win or I lose, or I'm happy or I'm sad. But if we say, really, we're not looking at the house so much as we want our kids to stay. They're in elementary school. They've got 2 more years before they go to middle school. So we want to stay in the same school so they can go to the same feeder school because we've always wanted them to graduate from XYZ high school. So let's do that. Well, that opens up all kinds of doors because then only one parent probably needs to be in that school district or zone for that school so that then the kids can use that residency to get into the school of choice. So that opens up a lot. Yeah. And one parent can maybe move out. And we can put agreements in that a parent staying in that area so the kids can go there for a period of time. There's lots of creative ways we can make that happen rather than staying tied to a house that maybe somebody can't afford.
Exactly. And that's the kind of thing when we talk about, I think, successful negotiating, it's that kind of flexibility of knowing like what's the underlying reason why something is important? And then what are all the different ways we can look at accomplishing that goal? And that gives us a lot of opportunity for successful outcomes as opposed to the one outcome.
Right. And winning and losing.
Because
there's nothing to win or lose. I mean, especially when we're dealing with our family dynamic, whether there's children or not, there's ongoing relationships with in-laws and family friends and. And one of the things I think people need to be really aware of when you enter into the divorce process, it is
by its nature, it's an adversarial process. It is our legal system is naming you as parties. And, you now have different interests that are not aligned. And that's just the nature of it. And I think when people are not intentional in understanding about this process, it can turn really quickly and become something that they never wanted it to be, which is very destructive for the family.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think we also have to be, as a client, as a person going through the process, be mindful of who your attorney is and that you're able to speak. You feel like you can speak to them in the way that you want to speak to them so that you are heard with your attorney. We're all different. We all have different styles. We all have different processes, different ways that we advocate. And that's good. We need every men, women, we think differently, we work differently. So I think it's important to have the right fit of who your lawyer is so that you feel like they hear you and advocate for you in the way that you want to be advocated for.
And that doesn't mean they're going to say yes to everything, right? You need to be careful if you've hired somebody and they never tell you no. They're probably not, I would say doing their job, because there are some things that are just unreasonable in terms of expectations, right? I mean, we are in a legal system. It's not a justice system. You're not, there's not one way to get the exact outcome that you want.
Right.
And so there are limitations in this process. Mm-hmm. And to know what those limitations are will help you make better decisions.
Agree.
So one of the things you and I were also talking about is just being kind of mindful, being true to yourself, and being mindful of the fact that sometimes your lawyer may have an agenda, and they may think that their agenda is aligned with yours, but it may not be. And you had an example of a situation where that was the case.
Yeah, this comes up from time to time where with all good intentions, excellent lawyers, we have our own set of biases because we've been doing this for a long, long time, and we know what the rules are, and we know what the family code says about custody or property division or whatever it says. And we know generally how courts rule on some basic kind of things. And so that's the framework in which we think. We've been trained to think that way. We work really hard on honing those skills, and that's good. That's why you have an attorney. But sometimes our filter as a lawyer gets in the way of really hearing what a client or seeing what a client needs, because we're looking for one outcome rather than maybe what's actually in front of us at the time. And an example that I have from a mediation I did a few years ago, it was dealing with the wife, and her attorney was wonderful, someone that I consider a friend. I refer cases to her. She's a very esteemed colleague in the community. And she was advocating so hard for her client to have kind of primary custody, child support, all that stuff. And I could just see as the day was going on, hours were passing, that the wife was just, getting lower and lower and lower in her chair and losing her voice, and just really I thought, this isn't working. Is it the stress? Is it just how hard mediation is? But as the day went on, I finally took the attorney aside and I said, I don't think she wants custody of these kids. There's something is going on here. She shouldn't be this upset. So we had a very candid conversation, went back in the room and talked to the client about it. And she broke down in tears, because she's a mom of 2 young kids, broke down in tears and said, I need a break. I can't do this.
Yeah,
I can't do this. And it was devastating to her, because she had to admit to a stranger and to her lawyer that she needed a break. And I could see that, she wasn't okay emotionally. Whatever she was going through, she really did need a break. And it was an aha moment, I think, for that lawyer. She just kind of sat back and she's like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. You need to show yourself some grace, and this is going to be okay. We'll figure it out. But the attorney was doing her job and advocating for her client and trying to get her as much mom time and as financially secure and all the things that she needed to continue with the life that she had before the divorce. But the client couldn't do it anymore. She was going through her own stuff.
The things that we would normally consider the win.
Right.
That wasn't her win.
And I think that the client didn't know how to advocate for herself. She probably was going in there thinking that's what she needed to do. And then as she's hearing all of this, all these responsibilities that she was going to have full time by herself, I think it was just the pressure just hit her, and she thought, I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean never. It means right now I need a break. And I don't remember if it was like 6 months I don't remember what we came up with, but we created a plan that worked for that family that was totally unique.
Right. And that's one of the benefits that negotiation offers, is you can come up with plans that are creative and tailored to your family situation, and not just sort of the one size fits all that happens at the courthouse. Right. And so,
or shame her for
or
saying,
shame her.
you know, dad gets all this stuff because he's so much better, and look at what a hot mess she is. She needs to go away because she's a good person going through a bad time. And I don't remember, I don't know what she was going through, but she was going through something that was significant.
And that's
honor
not
that.
unusual. Like divorce. I mean,
right.
divorce is a huge change in
Right.
people's lives. And
Right.
so to be honest and, with yourself about what your own limitations are.
Right.
So I think that that's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing a little bit of your insight as a mediator and a lawyer who's been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
It's a joy to sit down and talk with you, Carey.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
If you'd like to learn more about Carey Silvestri and her practice and her mediation, we'd love for you to visit Hargrave Family Law. We'll include a link to her bio, and we hope you'll subscribe and follow along for future episodes. Thank you.